Planned Parenthood terminates one of its own. Hey everyone, I'm Kristen Hawkins, and welcome to this edition of Explicitly Pro-Life. So today we have some big news. Dr. Leana Wen is out at Planned Parenthood. And who's to blame her to get credit? I don't know. I haven't seen a tweet from President Trump yet taking credit, but I'm sure we might. All right, so Leana Wen is fired. She is fired from Planned Parenthood. She's only been serving for about 8 months. Now, and what's interesting was it sounds like she was negotiating her departure from Planned Parenthood, so it doesn't look like they were getting along too well. So Leana Wen actually came out this week and said, look, I was negotiating my departure from Planned Parenthood, but the board has met secretly behind my back and has decided to terminate my contract. So there was some major mishandling of her departure or on the organization level. I'm not really surprised to see her go, to be honest with you. She is a doctor. Planned Parenthood made a big deal about, this was going to be the first time in decades that a doctor was running Planned Parenthood. And it was a huge kind of shift from Cecile Richards as Planned Parenthood to Leana Wen. Cecile Richards was known as an organizer, as an activist. Cecile Richards' husband was very high up in SEIU, the largest union in the country. If you ever want to know why unions and abortion have, this really tight relationship, you don't have to look much further than Cecile Richards and her husband. So it was a huge shift for Planned Parenthood to say we're choosing a doctor, which naturally I think there would be a little different management styles and in the direction. And really, when you have an organization that's been led by one leader for so long, it's very difficult to bring in a new leader. Anyone who kind of has studied organizational management knows it can be difficult. You've got staff that have been hired and loyal to one person, like the way one person does things. All of a sudden, you've got a new person. So I'm not shocked there's kind of transitions that are happening, but I think it was shocking the way Planned Parenthood handled the firing. In fact, I was getting a lot of personal gratification, to be honest with you, watching the Facebook comments on Planned Parenthood and Planned Parenthood's Actions Facebook page the night of Leana Wen's firing. Donors are visibly angered and pissed off at Planned Parenthood for how they handled it, that they've fired this woman. She was already trying to negotiate her departure. So what's the issue at hand here? Why would Planned Parenthood go to such extremes to honestly give themselves a black eye of not handling this firing, this termination correctly? What was the real issue? Abortion. This is what always comes down to Planned Parenthood, no matter what. It's always about abortion. What's been leaked from BuzzFeed and others is that Leana Wen wanted to talk about healthcare. She's obviously pro-abortion. She supports abortion rights. She spoke openly about that. But she wanted to say this is not a political issue. This is a healthcare issue. Planned Parenthood is a healthcare provider that provides all of these healthcare resources, and abortion just happens to be one of them. She kind of sounds like she wanted to kind of say, we provide all of these things and abortion's just one part of it, to kind of mitigate Planned Parenthood's kind of abortion business, which actually I believe is a very smart approach for Planned Parenthood. What we see on college campuses all the time at Students for Life is students believe Planned Parenthood actually provides way more resources than they actually provide. And when we show them kind of the list of Planned Parenthood's medical services versus the list of federally qualified health centers and pregnancy resource centers that provide way more services, it's kind of no question of who they're going to support at the end of the day. They say, oh, wow, Planned Parenthood's really about abortion. And when we show students that Planned Parenthood's really about abortion, minds change because they don't like to think of Planned Parenthood as just an abortion vendor. So I actually think Leana Wen's strategy was probably a very smart one. She's probably had these conversations with people just like I have. But Planned Parenthood, their board doesn't think so. They've instated one of their former board members who is a known social justice activist, and they want to be focused on abortion. They want to make abortion a political issue, and they want to continue to grow their political apparatus. That's what all this is about. going into 2020, they know, just as we know, that this is going to be the most important election of our lifetime. Now, I realize for like the past 4 election cycles, we've been told this presidential election is the most important of our lifetime, but this one really is. This one really is because, right now we believe in the pro-life movement. We have 5 pro-life Supreme Court justices. The challenge with that number of 5 is that, 2 of them are kind of, how to say this in a nice way, boring conservatives, where they, Justice Kavanaugh, Justice Roberts, tend to care more about the honor and the prestige of the court than about doing something radical that might cause controversy. And we've seen this, and Justice Roberts has openly spoken about this as Chief Justice. His, role is to preserve the honor and the dignity of the court. So even though I do believe Justice Roberts and Justice Kavanaugh are pro-life, that they are opposed to abortion, I do think that they would be less likely to rule on a case to reverse Roe on a 5-4 decision, on that 1 vote difference. They're going to want 6 or 7 justices with them. So it's a 6-3, 7-2 decision. This election, 2020, will determine that. If President Trump is reelected, I do believe, and he's already shown us, that he will appoint pro-life, anti-abortion Supreme Court justices. If you don't believe President Trump, believe Planned Parenthood, because they believe this. If President Trump does not win, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, Senator Cory Booker, even former Vice President Joe Biden, who used to try to be moderate and now is trying to be super extreme on abortion, if they are elected president, they have already promised to only appoint justices who will uphold Roe versus Wade. We've come so close to achieving kind of phase 1 of our plan to make abortion illegal and unthinkable in our nation. We're 1 to 2 votes away and could be 1 election away. If you look at the retirement ages of the Supreme Court justices, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, they've made 2 documentaries out of her. This past year, I was at the National Archives yesterday with my family, and they have a 19th Amendment display, and they have this feminist woman's section of the bookstore, and I was very angry. My husband had to drag me out of the National Archives bookstore because they had 1 bobblehead of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. They were selling this bobblehead of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I was pretty mad because this is a government-run agency. This is a national park, essentially, that was taking an opinion on abortion, in my view, because where the hell were the other justices, right? There's 8 other justices. Why weren't there 9? If you're going to have a bobblehead of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, have the other 8. She wasn't like she was the first woman on the Supreme Court. I knew exactly why they ordered the Ruth Bader Ginsburg bobblehead and were selling it at the National Archives bookstore in the 19th Amendment feminist section. We all know the reason why they're doing that, because she has become their hero in the abortion rights movement. Because for God's sakes, the woman was literally the dissenter in the 2007 Gonzalez v. Carhart, Gonzalez v. Planned Parenthood case, who literally stood up to the world and declared that partial birth abortion was okay, even though the rest of the court was talking about how gruesome the procedure was and that there's probably more humane ways to kill a baby up until the moment of birth in the last 3 months of pregnancy. And she didn't care. She has become their hero. That's why you go to Planned Parenthood conventions. When I was at the Women's March convention a year ago, they kept selling RBG pins, and they have RBG t-shirts. She has become their hero because she is unapologetically pro-abortion. And up until that baby takes its first breath, or heck, even maybe after, she doesn't care what happens to it. She doesn't care what gruesome procedure takes place. She doesn't care. So we know we know what this election is going to be about. The Trump administration, President Trump has been talking in all of his stump speeches about the election. He brings up infanticide. He's bringing up late-term abortion. We know it's going to be a talking point. Planned Parenthood recognizes this fact. They know we're 1 to 2 justices away. They know as well as we do. We have 5 who are pro-life right now. They've seen what's happened in Alabama, what's happened in Georgia, what's happened in Ohio, what's happened in Missouri. These statewide abortion bans, these heartbeat abortion bans. They just lost this week $60 million in federal funding because the Trump administration, even though President Trump hasn't been able to fully defund Planned Parenthood because we don't have Congress, and that's actually a whole episode because they should have defunded Planned Parenthood because we had 2 years of Republican leadership, but the Republicans were a bunch of wusses who wouldn't get the job done. The Trump administration on their own, through executive order, knew it was able to defund Planned Parenthood of Title X funding, family planning funding, enforcing a law that says family planning clinics can't co-locate, be in the same building as an abortion facility. And that hasn't been enforced. Several Planned Parenthoods have been receiving Title X funding. It amounts to about $60 million a year. President Trump's administration came out with the Protect Life rule. It was immediately appealed. The Ninth Circuit, which, miracle, upheld the Protect Life rule, and the Trump administration has said, we're not going to wait for other lawsuits. We're just going to start enforcing it. So this week, the same week that Leana Wen was fired, the Trump administration pulled $60 million from Planned Parenthood's bank account. Now, in the grand scheme of things, it's probably not a huge amount considering they're a $1 billion industry, but it's a good chunk of change. So that's what this is all about. Leana Wen was fired. Her contract was terminated by Planned Parenthood because she wasn't an aggressive abortion advocate. She wasn't out there like Cecile Richards defending abortion all the time. She actually wanted to talk about other things. Those 97% of services that Planned Parenthood says they do beyond the abortion, which, by the way, that 3% myth is just that. It's a myth. Planned Parenthood's abortion industry is about 11 to 12% of what they do, not 3%. We know they come up with that 3%. They've actually gotten those Pinocchios that the Washington Post gives when people lie. They've gotten the 4 Pinocchios from the Washington Post, a pro-abortion media outlet, about that stat, because the way they measure services, when a woman goes in for an abortion, she's often given a pap smear to test for potential cervical cancer, right? She's given a birth control prescription, and they measure every service, so they don't have to say, we just had one abortion patient. Her one, abortion comes out to be about 12 different services or 13 different services because they measure every month of the birth control pill they give her a prescription for, the ultrasound, the pap smear, the counseling they might have given her. So that way it lowers that percentage. So it looks like they provide way more services than they actually provide. So instead of measuring patients and what they've come in for, they measure the amount of services the patient gets. So one abortion becomes 12, 13, 14 different services, which gives them a bigger denominator, right? In that fraction, when they take the number of abortions to 330,000 abortions over the number of services, they get a bigger denominator, which means they get a lower percentage. So Planned Parenthood's all about abortions. That 3% myth is just that. It's when someone tells you that, it's really 11 to 12%. An interesting stat to remember when you're talking about what Planned Parenthood provides: a woman who walks into a Planned Parenthood pregnant. Okay, think about that. 94% of women who walk into a Planned Parenthood pregnant for a service get an abortion. 94%. That really should put it all into perspective for you. So Planned Parenthood's angry. They're upset that they've just lost $60 million. They're terrified of the Supreme Court overturning Roe and having several states hopefully banning abortion when states can rule on abortion again. They want to become this political machine that Cecile Richards, they went to the Washington Post right before Cecile left, and it was like this whole kind of article about how Cecile Richards transformed Planned Parenthood into one of the largest and most feared lobbyists in Washington, D.C., and they were absolutely right. She did. And so they want to continue Cecile Richards. In fact, I'm kind of surprised they just didn't hire Cecile Richards back. That's exactly what they're doing with this move. And they were willing to sacrifice their own. This is good news for the pro-life movement, even though, they're going to be ramping up, Planned Parenthood's going to be ramping up their election operation. They put more than $30 million into 2016. So I expect it's going to be even higher this year. This is good news for us because it actually, I think, will mean less abortions, hopefully. Because anytime an organization's not healthy, anytime an organization has actual issues developing within the organization itself is a weaker organization, right? So a weak organization, a weak Planned Parenthood is a good thing for the pro-life movement. It's a good thing for mothers, and quite frankly, it's a good thing for babies. So hopefully we'll see some victories while Planned Parenthood is in this state of disarray. In closing, I just want to add something. There was some talk. Leana Wen said she was already planning on leaving. It wasn't a good fit because she wanted to talk about other healthcare things, not just abortion. She also just kind of I think it was last week or the week before, announced that she had a miscarriage this summer. So as pro-lifers, I think we need to be very careful about how we talk about Leana Wen. She's obviously hurting. Her family's obviously hurting. We also know that Planned Parenthood can be, looking at Abby Johnson's story, Planned Parenthood can be a very vindictive, vicious, manipulative organization as a former employer. So, and I think Dr. Wen has just found out how cruel they are. And honestly, why are you surprised? I mean, I'm not surprised. This is how cruel Planned Parenthood is. I mean, this is an organization that is single-handedly responsible for ending the lives of 330,000 Americans every year. And they have no problem lying about. This is an organization that has for years charged women for abortions and then chopped up their babies, sold their babies for body parts, making double profit off of every abortion, and then went to Congress and lied about it, which, by the way, the DOJ is still investigating Planned Parenthood. And I've been told to be on the lookout for some good news in the future. Planned Parenthood is a cruel, manipulative, child-killing organization. So I am not surprised this is how they disposed of Leana Wen. I think Leana Wen is probably surprised of how they disposed of her. So let's approach Dr. Wen with charity and grace. If we see her out, if we meet her, if we're talking to her on Twitter, because she needs our prayers right now. Her family's obviously dealing with a lot of trauma through the miscarriage. And hopefully, maybe, just like my friend Abby Johnson, maybe she becomes pro-life one day too. But that's where we're at, everyone. Planned Parenthood, they're out for blood. They're out for blood in 2020, and it's not just the blood of the babies. We know exactly what they want. They want to ensure that abortion is legal in this country for whatever reason up until the moment of birth, and they want all of us to pay for it. They want the full repeal of the Hyde Amendment. Planned Parenthood is about one thing, and that's abortion, abortion, abortion. And they've just made that fundamentally clear with the firing of Leana Wen, the appointing of an activist, and they've just declared to the whole country, game on for 2020. All right, thanks everyone for tuning in. I'll see you next week on Explicitly Pro-Life. Don't forget to subscribe to my podcast on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, anywhere podcasts are available, and share with your friends and have them subscribe too. Thanks. Bye.